Malicious Compliance number 5. My toxic ex-boss asked me to review the company, so I gave him exactly what he wanted. A little context: I'm 29, and I recently quit my job at a small engineering and design firm in Germany, where I worked as a specialist. The company was a complete disaster. The pay was laughable, management was wildly unpredictable, and I was expected to handle the responsibilities of a full-time project manager, like planning the entire renovation of a major municipal building, without the salary, title, or support that should have come with it. Employee turnover was insane. 3 other coworkers quit around the same time I did, and during the 4 years I worked there, my boss went through 5 different assistants. Eventually, I packed my things, moved to another city, and decided to start over. About a week after my last day, my former boss messaged me as if nothing had happened. He asked me to leave a review of the company on a popular local employer review website, basically the German equivalent of Glassdoor. Apparently, this guy genuinely believed we had parted on excellent terms. He was probably expecting me to give the company 5 stars and help improve its already pathetic rating. I rolled my eyes and didn't respond. Then, a few days ago, I checked the company's page again and noticed 3 brand new reviews. All of them gave the company 4.5 stars, and all 3 had been posted within the same week. It was painfully obvious that management had written them. Every review used the exact same corporate cliches: excellent work-life balance and outstanding employee health initiatives. And what did those amazing health initiatives consist of? 15 minutes of stretching every Wednesday. Even more suspiciously, the reviews somehow praised the exact things employees complained about the most. That was when I remembered my boss's message. He wanted a review? Fine, I would give him one. I sat down and wrote an extremely honest, carefully worded review. I kept everything professional and clearly framed every statement as my personal experience, using phrases such as, "Based on my experience, I was left with the impression that." This way, the company would have no legitimate legal grounds to demand that the review be removed. I gave them 1 or 2 stars in almost every category and explained in detail the complete lack of support, the terrible communication, and the unreasonable workload. But I didn't stop there. I also contacted the website's support team and reported the 3 suspicious reviews. I pointed out their nearly identical wording and the fact that they had all appeared within days of one another. Less than 4 hours later, 2 of the 3 fake reviews were removed. The site's automated system probably detected the manipulation because my boss was apparently stupid enough to post them from the same office computer and IP address. After the fake reviews disappeared and my honest 1-star review went live, the company's average rating dropped even further. That was when management started to panic. How do I know? Because my former boss messaged me again. This time, his message was full of typos, and he was practically begging me to leave a positive review and help the company. He still has absolutely no idea that I'm the one who tanked their rating and reported the fake reviews. Once again, I read his message and said nothing. And here's the cherry on top. Yesterday, a friend who still works there reached out to me. He said my review had hit the nail right on the head. He also told me that ever since it was published, management has suddenly become unbelievably polite, friendly, and talkative with everyone. Why? Because now they're terrified that even more employees are about to quit. They demanded a doctor's note, so I got one. I'm a 26-year-old man, and I really don't like calling out of work. I hate losing money, so I usually only take a sick day when I'm feeling absolutely terrible. I work in the service industry, and as many people know, management loves pressuring sick employees to come in and making them feel guilty for staying home. Make no mistake, at some point, your food has probably been prepared by someone who was seriously ill, but still came to work because their manager ordered them to. And to make matters worse, these companies often don't even provide their employees with health insurance, yet they still tell them that if they miss work without a doctor's note, it will count as an unexcused absence. One day, I got sick and realized there was absolutely no way I could go to work. My employer had apparently forgotten that I was covered by my father's excellent health insurance. I called and asked for just 1 day off because I could barely breathe and kept drifting in and out of sleep. Their response: "You need a doctor's note, otherwise it will count as an unexcused absence." That really pissed me off. I had worked myself to the bone for them and had come in sick more than once, but now they were talking to me as if I were lying, as if I had to prove there was a legitimate reason I'd been wearing a mask at work. But since I actually had good insurance, I went to see a doctor. The doctor gave me a note excusing me from work for 4 days. I returned to work, handed it to my manager, and said, "Here's your doctor's note, and here's the date I'll be coming back." A few months later, they tried the same thing again. This time, I got a doctor's note excusing me for even longer. I also asked the doctor to specify exactly when I would no longer be contagious and could safely work around the food we served to customers. After that, they never asked me for another doctor's note. Now they know they have two options. Either they let me stay home and recover for the 1 or 2 days I ask for, or my doctor takes me out of work for an entire week. But I'm never working while sick again, unless I personally choose to. You don't want me doing your job? Fine. Then you can run around and do everything yourself. This happened about a year ago, but I only recently discovered this subreddit and realized I had a story of my own to share. Although, to be fair, mine isn't nearly as extreme as some of the others here. I worked at a buffet-style restaurant. At the beginning of every shift, employees were assigned different responsibilities. Someone worked the register, someone picked up prepared food from the kitchen, someone restocked and rearranged the buffet, while others cleared tables, cleaned the dining area, washed dishes, and so on. Most of the time, I was the one running back and forth between the dining area and the kitchen because I was faster than everyone else. The kitchen was pretty far away, and we were expected to pick up the food and return within 3 minutes. If we took too long, the shift supervisor would call either us or the kitchen and ask what was taking so long. Between the kitchen and the hallway, there was a counter where we would bring our carts. Normally, the process went like this. You walked in, told the cooks what you needed, and within a few seconds, or maybe a minute, they would place everything on the counter. You would load it onto your cart and take it back to the dining area. However, the kitchen was sometimes understaffed, so if we needed something simple like sauce, chopped green onions, or jam, we would just walk in and grab it ourselves. There was no official rule allowing this. It was simply what everyone did when the cooks were too busy. That day, I needed several sauces, a couple of dishes, and some chopped green onions. I knew exactly where everything was, so after asking for the items and waiting for more than a minute, I called out, "I'm coming in to grab the green onions." I walked into the kitchen and started transferring the already chopped onions into a bowl. Suddenly, one of the cooks rushed over and started yelling at me to put everything down immediately. According to him, it wasn't my job, and I was doing everything wrong, even though I wasn't doing anything wrong at all. I asked what the problem was. After all, employees had been occasionally grabbing items from the kitchen themselves for years. He told me that gathering the food was his job. My only responsibility was to call out the order and wait. All right then. The next time I entered the kitchen, I waited until that same cook was busy doing something else. Then, at the top of my lungs, I started shouting, "Sauce number 1, sauce number 2, green onions, honey, this item, and that thing over there too." I continued yelling out the entire list. I could have gathered most of those items myself in the same amount of time I spent standing there, shouting their names. The cook ignored me for several seconds, so I repeated the entire order. When I started shouting the list for the 3rd time, he finally grabbed one of the sauces, placed it on the counter, and said, "I'm the only one here. Stop yelling, just leave the order slip and wait." I told him, "I have to be back in the dining area within 3 minutes. Otherwise, the shift supervisor will call and ask where I am, and then I'll have to explain that the cook is taking too long to prepare my order." He sighed. "Fine, just come in and grab everything yourself." I reminded him that only a few minutes earlier, he had explicitly told me not to touch anything because it wasn't my job. Apparently, he had changed his mind because he muttered, "Forget what I said, just get it yourself." But I reminded him once again that he had officially told me I wasn't allowed to take anything from the kitchen. So now, unfortunately, I would have to contact the shift supervisor and confirm whether I was actually permitted to do it. In the end, the cook had to spend the next several minutes running around the kitchen and gathering every single item I needed. After that, he never complained again when we walked into the kitchen and grabbed the supplies ourselves. What I did when I was the only person in my group who actually gave a damn. A long time ago, I was studying literature at university. Naturally, my schedule was packed with all kinds of literature courses. This particular group project was assigned in a class called Madness in Classical Literature. It was a fun course. The professor was slightly unhinged, and the topics were genuinely interesting. Then came the dreaded day when he announced that we would be doing a group project. We had to form groups of 3 and prepare a 30-minute presentation about madness in the literature of any historical period. I was paired with 2 women who, at first glance, seemed like reasonably hard-working students. One of them enthusiastically suggested that we focus on madness in 19th century Scottish literature. She sounded so confident about it that the rest of us agreed. When we told the professor our chosen topic, he made a strange face. After class, he asked us to stay behind and double-checked whether we were absolutely sure sure about our choice. The woman who had suggested it was more than confident. The professor nodded distractedly and said he would help us find at least a few sources because, as it turned out, there was far less 19th century Scottish literature than we had assumed. Eventually, we were allowed to include Lord Byron because he had some connection to Scotland. We were also assigned an incredibly long and painfully dull story about some guy who was either suffering from hallucinations or having a religious and existential encounter with the devil himself. I've read plenty of boring literature in my life, but this was the most unbearable collection of words my brain had ever been forced to process. Then I discovered something even worse. Neither of my partners, including the self-proclaimed enthusiast of 19th century Scotland, had any intention of doing a damn thing. They hadn't even read the assigned works. They couldn't even be bothered to read the relatively short Byron poem. Wonderful. So, in the end, I sat down and completed the entire project by myself. That included preparing the handouts we were supposed to print and distribute to the class so everyone could follow along with our presentation. That was when I decided to get a little revenge. I didn't want to be that student who immediately ran to the professor to complain about his group members, but I also didn't want my partners, especially the one whose love for Scotland had dragged me into this mess, to receive credit for work they hadn't done. So I memorized everything, and I mean everything. Meanwhile, I only included a few vague bullet points in the handouts. There wasn't enough information for anyone to understand the plots of the assigned works or figure out exactly what we were going to discuss. Then the day of the presentation arrived. I met my partners in the classroom and handed them the printed materials. They visibly relaxed when they saw that I had apparently prepared everything. They had absolutely no idea what was coming. When it was our turn, we walked to the front of the room. They stood on either side of me. I distributed the handouts and began delivering the entire presentation from memory, explaining madness in 19th century Scottish literature. First, I gave a detailed analysis of Byron. Then I moved on to the main character of the second work, some miserable guy whose name, I believe, was Tim. For the entire 30-minute presentation, my partners stood beside me, silently nodding with very serious expressions on their faces. When I finished, it was time for questions. The other students were invited to ask us about the historical period, the authors, and the works we had chosen. That part lasted another 15 minutes. I called on the first student, who asked something about the religious themes in that painfully boring story. I could have answered the question immediately. Instead, I paused. I gave my partners a chance to respond, assuming, of course, that either of them had anything to say. After every question, I slowly looked from one partner to the other and allowed the silence to become almost unbearably awkward before finally answering it myself. Within a couple of minutes, it became painfully obvious to everyone in the room that I was the only person in our group who knew anything about madness in 19th century Scottish literature. Yes, I completed the entire project alone, and until the very last moment, I allowed my partners to believe that everything was perfectly fine, right up until it suddenly became clear that it wasn't. Was I being petty? Absolutely. But if I had to suffer through that horrifyingly boring story just because someone had watched Outlander a few too many times, I wanted to get at least a little revenge. Edit. I'm happy to report that after the presentation, the professor pulled me aside and told me that, considering how everything had gone, we would be graded individually. I received the highest possible grade. For some strange reason, my partners stopped speaking to me after that project, so I never found out what grades they received. Apparently, their grades were low enough to make them cut me out of their lives completely. And honestly, good riddance. Emergency clothing purchases can't be reimbursed. There was a period in my life when I worked in another city and only returned home on weekends. I stayed in a hotel during the week and always packed exactly enough clothes to last until Friday. Then one day, I received a call telling me I would have to stay and work through the weekend. That meant I would be away for 2 weeks straight, but I had only packed enough clothes for one. I explained to my boss that I had run out of clean socks and underwear. I could manage with the rest of my clothes somehow, but I would need to buy those essentials. I was told that the company wouldn't reimburse clothing purchases. Alright then. I put all my clothes into the hotel's laundry bag and sent everything out to be washed. The hotel charged £5 for every pair of socks and underwear, and £10 for every shirt and pair of trousers. Naturally, I submitted the entire laundry bill as a business travel expense. In the end, the company paid £120 instead of the £20 it would have cost to buy me some new socks and underwear. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and tell me what you think in the comments. Which story was your favorite? And if you want to hear more crazy stories like these, subscribe to AT Storytime and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Your support really helps the channel grow. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.